Good day everyone, my name is Isa Concepcion Dagatan from BS Social Work student and I'll be reporting about the BF Skinner's experimental analysis on behavior. So, who is BF Skinner? B.F. Skinner was an American psychologist, behaviorist, author, inventor, and social philosopher. He was a professor of psychology at Harvard University from 1958 until his retirement in 1974. Best known for his influence on behaviorism, Skinner referred to his own philosophy as radical behaviorism and suggested that the concept of free will was simply an illusion. All human action, he instead believed, was the direct result of conditioning.
What is experimental analysis?
Experimental analysis of behavior is a school of thought and psychology founded on B.F. Skinner's philosophy of radical behaviorism and defines the basic principles used in applied behavior analysis.
So what is radical behaviorism?
Radical behaviorism is a thoroughgoing form of behaviorism that attempts to understand all human behaviorism, including private events such as thoughts and feelings, terms of controlling variables in the history of the person. Behavior is everything that we do, such as breathing and functioning. Non-humans are included too. This is what makes radical behaviorism radical. Boehm writes, in this sense, behaviors such as a person's acting shy at a social gathering or a boss yelling at an employee seemingly without reasons are attributed to external forces. So, the shy person may be accustomed to an environment of isolation. The boss may have just received an email with distressing news. According to radical behaviorism, what people think or feel or how they act doesn't exist independently, but rather is the result of their experience and environment.
So what is applied behavior analysis?
Applied behavior analysis, also known as ABA, is a type of therapy that is commonly used in children with autism to improve behaviors on a spectrum of different socially significant skills.
Basic learning process and behavior analysis.
One of the basic learning process in behavior analysis is the classical or respondent conditioning. A relatively neutral stimulus or the conditioned stimulus aims to signal the occurrence of a biologically significant stimulus or the unconditioned stimulus such as food or pain. This is typically done by repeatedly pairing the two stimuli as in Pavlov's experiments with dogs, where a bell was followed by food. As a result, the conditioned stimulus yields a conditioned response that is usually similar to unconditioned response elicited by unconditioned stimulus. The most famous example of classical conditioning was Ivan Pavlov's experiment with dogs who salivated in response to a bell. Pavlov showed that when a bell was sounded each time the dog was fed, the dog learned to associate the sound with the presentation of the food. We call the food the unconditioned stimulus and we call salivation the unconditioned response. However, nobody trains a dog to salivate over some steak. However, when we pair unconditioned stimulus like food with something that was previously neutral, like the sound of a bell, that neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus, and so classical conditioning was discovered. So, how classical conditioning works at human? For example, miadto ka sa doktor para magpa-inject. And mayon si na ayaw ka bala ka dili ni sakit. Pero pagtusok sa imo na feel na nimo ang kasakit. Pag-abot og semana miadto na sad kag dentist para pa-check up. And ang dentist na ay gibutang sa imong baba para lantawon imong ngipon. And miingon si na ayaw ka bala ka dili ni sakit. Pero kabalo ka na kadto dili sakit nya midagan gihapon kag misinggit. So tong time na miadto kas doktor para pa-inject became a conditioned stimulus when they were paired with pain of the shot, which the unconditioned stimulus. followed by your conditioned respond tong midagan ka. The second basic learning process and behavior analysis is the operant conditioning. It is a type of associative learning process through which the strength of a behavior is modified by reinforcement or punishment. It is also a procedure that is used to bring about such learning. Operant conditioning explains how consequences lead to changes in voluntary behavior. So, how does it work? There are two main components in operant conditioning, the reinforcement and the punishment. The reinforcement makes it more likely na imo buhaton o utro, while ang punishers make it less likely. The reinforcement and punishment can be negative or positive, but it doesn't mean bad or good. The positive means the addition of stimulus like getting dessert after your veggies. And negative means the removal of stimulus like getting a night of no homework because you did well on your exam. Example, pag humanin yung kaon nang hugas dayon kag plato and then imong mama gives you a hug and then says, "Thank you for helping me." In that situation, your mom gives you a positive reinforcement that it makes you more likely to do it again, which is ang paghugas og plato. So, operant conditioning is everywhere in our lives. The difference between operant and classical conditioning is that classical conditioning involves associating an involuntary response and a stimulus, while operant conditioning is about associating a voluntary behavior and consequences. The first experimental tools in behavioral research that Skinner developed was the operant conditioning chamber, or Skinner's box. Skinner devised the Skinner's box to identify how the consequences of actions affected future behavior. So, in terms of some key aspects of the Skinner's box, contained a lever that was used for both positive and negative reinforcement. The positive reinforcement and the flow and form of food was delivered through a food dispenser after lever pressing. There was an electric grid on the floor that would deliver painful electric current. There was a light that went flash as a warning signal to the rat that the electric current was about to come. So, in order to provide motivation for behavior, Skinner used hungry rats that were placed in his Skinner box, and much like the cats in Thorn Dog's puzzle box, initially, their behavior was random until they inadvertently hit the lever, which resulted in the immediate rewarding of a food pellets. Now, didn't take the rats long to learn that lever pressing resulted in the positive outcome of receiving a food reinforced, so therefore the consequences of receiving food, which was the desirable stimulus, ensured that the lever pressing behavior would be repeated again. This is positive reinforcement. Now, initially, Skinner used a continuous reinforcement schedule which results in the fastest rate of acquisition, and every time the rat hit the lever, a food pellet would be delivered. Skinner box was also used for negative reinforcement, so the rat was subject to an adversive stimulus and unpleasant electric current. And again, the random act of lever pressing switch off the electric current, so the consequences of escaping the electric current, aversive stimulus, ensured that the behavior would be repeated, a lever pressing. Later on, Skinner would switch on the signal light just prior to turning on the electric current, and again, the rat fairly quickly learned the association between the lights and the electric current and the lever pressing. So, the light would be switched on, the rat would rapidly hit the lever to remove the aversive stimulus. That is, the behavior of lever pressing had been reinforced to remove the aversive stimulus. Thus, we have negative reinforcement.
The second experimental tools in behavioral reservoir is the
Cumulative recorder, an instrument used to record the responses of subjects graphically. Traditionally, its graphing mechanism has consisted of a rotating drum or of paper equipped with a marking needle. The needle would start at the bottom of the page, and the drum would turn the roll of paper horizontally. Each subject response would result in the marking needle moving vertically along the paper, one thick. This makes it possible for the rate of response to be calculated by finding the slope of the graph at a given point. For example, a regular rate of response would cause the needle to move vertically at a regular rate, resulting in a straight diagonal line rising towards the right. Skinner designed it for use with the operant chamber as a convenient way to record and view the rate of responses, such as a lever press or a key pick. In this device, a sheet of paper gradually unrolls over a cylinder. Each response steps a small pen across the paper, starting at one edge. When the pen reaches the other edge, it quickly resets to the initial side. The slope of the resulting ink line graphically displays the rate of the response. For example, rapid responses yield a steeply sloping line on the paper. Slow responding yields a line of low slope. The cumulative recorder was a key tool used by Skinner in his analysis of behavior, and it was very widely adopted by other experimenters, gradually falling out of use with the advent of the laboratory computer and use of the line graph.